So I am really feeling the embrace of the generations this day. I carry that with me wherever I go, but I'm definitely feeling it today. Rabbi Donald Splansky has spoken many times from this bima, and it's always a treat for the congregation, but especially for me. My father has been the beloved rabbi of Temple Beth Am in Framingham, Massachusetts for 30 years, rabbi and now rabbi emeritus. He is an expert in Targum. Not many of you know this, but I'll share it with you now. He is one of the world's experts in Targum, which is the translation of the Hebrew Bible into Aramaic with all of its variations. And he is my #1 rabbinic role model and mentor. Abba, come teach us.
I'm also your #1 fan. I'm always amazed at how able and articulate and talented is our daughter, Yael. Avishai's parents have achieved great success in teaching him their ways and the ways of our ancestral traditions. He is, if I may say so, a terrific young man who has made great use of his formal Jewish education, both here at Holy Blossom Temple and at the Toronto Heschel School. He is bright and musical and loving, and as we saw, he is humorous. And besides his excellent rendering of the Torah and Haftarah today, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of characters both in ancient Greek mythology and in modern comic books. We do well on such a day and occasion to understand for what goals we should strive in raising in our culture a liberal Jewish child. And we can be guided by the writings of one of the great Jewish scholars of the last century. About 40 years ago, Gershom Scholem of the Hebrew University published an essay titled 3 Types of Jewish Piety. I would like this morning to share his insights with you and also to suggest how they may still guide our children so that they will embody one or more of those types of Jewish piety. And I'd like to retain Scholem's use of the Hebrew terms for these ideal types. First, the Talmid Chacham, the rabbinic scholar. Next, the Tzaddik, the just or righteous person. And then the Chassid, a more difficult term to translate, but usually thought of as the saintly person. These are the ideal types for the last 2,000 years. First of all, the Talmid Chacham, which literally means a student of a wise one. What is a Talmid Chacham? Essentially one who values intellect and prizes the study of Jewish texts in a concentrated and rational way. It has no relation to an emotional scale of values. The Talmid Chacham is able to read sacred texts with ease and to apply their interpretations to the changing needs of the modern community. He is not only a perpetual student, but also a gifted teacher, and he would not be ashamed of calling himself what he is. It would be strange, however, for a person to call himself a tzaddik or a chassid, for such a statement would disprove itself. But a scholar could easily demonstrate, and with all modesty, that he or she is a scholar. In Yiddish culture, the highest praise one can give to another is to say, kann lernen. He knows how to learn. And the next highest praise would be to say, he has Sitzfleisch. Sitzfleisch literally means flesh to sit upon. referring to a scholar's determination and ability to sit for long periods of time and actually learn the text. I've heard a wonderful translation of the Yiddish term Sitzfleisch, assiduity. The goal, of course, as the term student of the wise implies, is not only to obtain knowledge, but also wisdom, which we know is more elusive. My favorite illustration of the difference between knowledge and wisdom, admittedly a trivial one, is knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put the tomato in the fruit salad. So if we ask, what should Jewish parents do to instill this first type of Jewish piety in their children today, it is clear that we should encourage our children to sit and to study, and yet not to demand that they get straight A's. The material they study today should be both Jewish and non-Jewish texts. In our open society, and due to the obvious need to prepare to make a living, our children will certainly study and prepare for that purpose. They will make a living someday. Will they also make a Jewish life? For that to happen, their Jewish education, as we all know, must not stop at bar mitzvah time or even during high school, but Jewish study is a lifelong pursuit. Now, I don't know how it is here in Canada, but in the United States, Jewish parents often tend to be very zealous to force their children to become high academic achievers. Rabbi Harold Schulweis of Encino, California, once observed that we Jews often practice a particularly cruel form of child abuse. It is called expressing constant disappointment in children's academic achievement. And the late Catholic priest, sociologist, and novelist Andrew Greeley noted that certain communities operate nursery schools that will accept only students who show promise as college material. The result of such pediatric exclusivity leads ambitious parents to hire professionals to train toddlers so that they will pass the admissions test into elite nursery schools. Consider the shame of having a nursery school dropout. And Rabbi Schulweis himself confessed that he was guilty of a similar sin. He came once into the bedroom of his teenage son and came up behind him, and he placed his two hands on the two shoulders of his son. And his son turned and said to him, "How is it, Dad? You always show me affection when I'm studying." I much prefer the techniques of parenting that are recommended in the book The Blessing of the Skinned Knee by Wendy Mogul, who recommends motivation and understanding and allowing a child to grow at a fair pace. I understand that Wendy Mogul addressed some members of Holy Blossom via Skype only a couple of years ago. If you doubt the dangers involved in parental pushing for perfection from their kids, see the book The Overachievers by Alexandra Robbins. Parents, of course, must know when and how to let their kids go. And there's a great art in that as well. Children must find their own way and seek their own truth. As Michel de Montaigne said, we can be knowledgeable with other people's knowledge, but we cannot be wise with other people's wisdom. So when we come to speak of the next two ideal types of Jewish piety, the tzaddik and the chassid, we enter a different sphere. The values represented by the Talmid Chacham, the student of the wise, the rabbinical scholar, belong to the more academic sphere, the more contemplative sphere. The tzaddik and the chassid, however, are judged not by the perfection of their intellectual penetration, but by the way they perform the discharge of their religious duties in action. Of course, the types are not exclusive of each other. The tzaddik and the chassid represent what we would call the active and ethical values. Gershom Scholem says the term tzaddik originates in forensic language. The tzaddik is somebody who has been before the courts and has been found not guilty. In this very sober vein, the term has entered Jewish ethics. The tzaddik is the Jew who tries to comply with the commandments of the Torah. He or she would be a tzaddik, or now we would say also a tzadeket, in the eyes of God. If brought before the heavenly court, he or she would be judged to have fulfilled his or her duties more than 50%, unquote. We mortals, however, do not know God's scales of justice. God gets to decide such things. In the eyes of our neighbors, a tzaddik is one who tries one's best to fulfill the law as far as it is within our power. A tzaddik may or may not be a great scholar, but is surely a person of good deeds and a person who is in control of human passions and ego needs. A tzaddik may or may not have a scholarly head, but certainly has a Jewish heart. A tzaddik tries to put himself in good order and ultimately the world in good order. And so there is even a messianic spark in the deeds of the tzaddik. How might a parent today impress upon a child the importance of living a very lofty, ethical Jewish life? Certainly, first and foremost, by serving as a role model, by giving to charity, to tzedakah, as we heard in the Haftarah today, by performing good and generous deeds of every kind, by belonging to a synagogue and showing support for it, by doing some kind of volunteer service for the synagogue or other Jewish organizations, by being what we might call a Jewish survivalist, a supporter of Jewish causes, and for that matter of non-Jewish causes, of Israel, and of larger issues such as good government, health, environment, justice, peace, and the improvement of medical research and all research. It starts by putting spare change in the tzedakah box, and it never ends throughout one's life. It usually includes helping the sick, the poor, the disadvantaged. It means being careful about what one says and about what one does not say. It means not committing any form of idolatry. It means doing special deeds to make Shabbat and holidays special, and showing hospitality to new people and new ideas, elevating what we call social action to a high calling. It means doing good deeds not as a human being in general, but as a Jew in particular, to be conscious of doing something as a Jew, because the Torah commands it and the prophets insisted on it, and Jewish leaders and tzaddikim of all generations personified it. A tzaddik is one who cares about the Jewish community, knowing that the community in turn cares about him or her. I love the moment in the service. It happens 5 times during a year when we complete any of the 5 books of the Torah, that the congregation sings those words that are so important. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek, be strong, and let us strengthen one another. Not only are parents involved in the education and role modeling for a child, the entire community is involved and rejoices in that particular child's growth. And I'm delighted that Abishai has enjoyed this community of Holy Blossom Temple as such an important part of his upbringing. The third type of Jewish piety, according to Gershom Scholem, is the Hasid. And please remember that the term Hasid is much older than the founding of the Hasidic movement in the 18th century. It has very little, if anything, to do with the Hasidic movement. It goes all the way back 2,000 years to rabbinic times. And it comes from the Hebrew word chesed, so hard to translate. The word combines the meanings of charitableness and loving kindness, of loyalty and grace. A Hasid does Jewish deeds with an elevated spirit and love and zeal and enthusiasm. Unlike the Talmid Chacham, the scholar, and the tzaddik, the just and righteous person, a Hasid has this spiritual fervor in performing these deeds of loving kindness. Gimiluch Hasadim. The philosopher Moses Maimonides wrote that a person who gives attention to all the commandments is a tzaddik. But a person, in addition, who singles out one of the commandments, one mitzvah, to exalt it and to elevate it, who goes to extremes to perform it, and thus leaves the middle road, he or she is the Hasid. And here too, the Hasid need not be a scholar, although he or she might be, but rather an exceptional and highly spiritual person. This type of rabbinic piety came to its peak in the Musar movement of 19th century Lithuania, where Rabbi Israel Salanter taught the importance of specializing in an ethical mitzvah of one's choice. And if we think of modern examples, I'm sure we could all come up with them. I know, for example, of a woman in Jerusalem, not at all out to save the world, but every Friday on late afternoon, she goes to Hadassah Hospital outside of the new city of Jerusalem, and she brings a load of electric candles for the female patients in the hospital to light before Shabbat. That is her mitzvah. And she helps those women patients to say the blessing to welcome the Shabbat. And I know of another woman, the late Miriam Mendelow, who saw the plight of many impoverished elderly Jews and people of all ages with disabilities, and she founded a working place for them, a special sheltered workshop called Yad Lazaken. Perhaps some of you have been there. Lifeline for the elderly, where people, really needy people, can sew and knit and make beautiful crafts and make a living and feel good about themselves. Miriam Mendelow provided for them as best she could, and no doubt she saved many lives. Elie Wiesel has written about a woman who survived the Holocaust and made her way to New York City and spent most of her days volunteering in maternity wards of hospitals, helping in particular the Jewish patients in any way that she could. And she did it as a volunteer, and the people in the hospitals came to know her and welcome her. And she would rejoice with the birth of every baby, partly because her own children had perished in the Holocaust. But when a baby was born, she would say in Yiddish, "Das Yiddish Volk hat bekommen noch ein Kind, Mazel Tov." The Jewish people has acquired another child, Mazel Tov. Israelis call such a person Mishugal Adavar, crazy for a special cause. And I bet we can all think of well-known leaders and philanthropists who devote themselves to great causes. We can also think of relatively unknown people who specialize in love of family and friends, whose deeds have enriched our world and touched our very souls. Sholem notes that whether you are a Chassid or not is basically a matter of gift and character. It is a propensity which you have or have not. If you have it, you can develop it. But I would suggest a parent still can affect a growing child and can educate a child, at least in part, to develop such a piety. As in principle, you could educate someone to become a Talmid Chacham or a Tzaddik. I suggest, however, that parents, by precept and example, can create a total environment for a youngster to grow a soul. One doesn't hear too often about that as a Jewish concept. But it is a way to help someone find one's passion, to cultivate one's muse. And this extends to music and to the arts as well. Parents can send their children to a Jewish summer camp or on a trip to Israel. Children come home from those experiences enthusiastic beyond belief and can speak openly of their own belief in God. Avishai has had such a head start in this, hearing his mother speak about her belief in God, Shabbat after Shabbat. Obviously, more is caught than is taught. And I hope each of our children and grandchildren will live in keeping with one or more of the three Jewish pieties: the development of the head and of the heart and of the soul. Such a child will forge armor for life against the secularism and the cynicism of so much of our modern society, and against the chaos and the cruelty of so much of our world. Such a child will happily join the march of the Jewish people through history and will be able to attest to the reality of the living God, the friend behind the phenomena. Today we send our love and our best wishes to Avishai. May you enjoy and develop one or more of these three Jewish pieties. May they move you and animate you throughout your life and for many decades beyond what we are now privileged to share with you. And to all here who care about the welfare of children and grandchildren and all children, to you I say, and we may join in saying together, Chazak, Chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and let us strengthen one another. Amen.